Now we are going to hear from two exceptional speakers on sports volunteers, how and where to take action. We're going to hear from Dr. Lindsey Reece and Jessica Cook. So, Dr. Lindsey Reece brings extensive experience in policy, strategy, research and evaluation, specialising in sport and physical activity, to her role as Director of Sports Programs with the Australian Sports Commission. In this role, Lindsey oversees the ASC's National Participation Investment Programs, coordinates sector engagements with state and territory governments and industry peak bodies, including the Community Sport Association Network, and leads strategic initiatives including the National Volunteering Strategy and National Sports Volunteer Coalition Action Plan. Lindsey is also chair of the National Sport Volunteer Coalition. Jessica Cook has dedicated the last 13 years of the sport and recreational industry and is currently the Director of the Sport and Recreational Partnership Office with the Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport. In this role, Jessica is responsible for driving engagement and collaboration with key stakeholders, including government departments, to identify opportunities and partnerships that contribute to a more active Queensland. In addition to the role in government, Jessica has been recognised for extraordinary commitments to her local AFL clubs, the mighty Sandgate Hawks, where she volunteers her time coaching and supporting the local sporting community. So, can we put our hands together for Lindsey and Jess? Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I'm going to head over to this side of the stage. Afternoon, everybody. It really is an absolute delight to be on stage, especially sharing it with Jess. And it's a really nice collaboration between the ASC and Queensland Government. Shout out to Tim as well for putting together such an amazing programme. So thank you so much to Tim and the team for such a great day. It really is great. I have to say that the temperature, though, is a little bit lower than I was expecting when I came to Queensland this morning. So if you do need to get up and move, just to keep the aircon and circulation going, feel free to. We've got about 20 minutes to go through some work that we've been doing on volunteering in sport. I'm going to do the caveat, though, right up front, that we haven't got all the answers. So put your hands up if you're currently grappling with a challenge or an issue or a problem around volunteering. Yeah, I'm really sorry I haven't got the answer. but what we're going to share with you a little... I think, and what is great though is volunteering is certainly on the agenda. We're talking about it a lot more, but what I want to really iterate is that it's a journey. We're all on it. We've got to change the narrative. We've got to do something differently, and that's what we are doing. And when Kieran started, he was definitely really passionate about putting volunteering back in our strategic vision, and we've now felt it throughout the whole high performance and community space, which is very exciting. But when I say volunteering, what comes to mind when I say that word? Does an object come to mind? Does a person come to mind? What kind of, just spend like 30 seconds having to think about, what does volunteering mean to you? Anyone wish to share? Any urgent, like quick words or, you haven't got time or it takes up time? Takes up lots of time, yeah? Anything else that comes to mind? Dedication, service. Reward? Yep. Anything else? Parents. Don't we rely so much on parents? There's a whole other world out there, but we seem to rely on parents.
Simply helping out.
Simply helping out. Amazing. That's one of my favourites. And I have to say, that's what I came back to. When I was tasked with saying, right, we want you to lead a new volunteering strategy, first and foremost, what came to mind for me was actually oranges. I know it sounds really old school. And I'm not sure you even have orange segments now at half time, but that was the fruit that came to mind. The other one was my nan. And and that sounds really cheesy, but because volunteering actually for her was the heart of her life. She made friends, often she was a tennis player, she was often had a cracking backhand, but had an alcohol drink in the other one. And she had really inappropriate jokes. So I'm going to kick us off, because I felt like we needed a bit of momentum. This is one of Danny Val's, so credit to her, what does volunteering and wetting yourself, she was 90, what does wetting yourself and volunteering have in common? Everyone sees you doing it, but only you get the warm, fuzzy feeling. Okay, we've started, we're off. Okay, we can get back on track. I'm an academic by background, so I've got to start off with the data and the juicy stuff. Volunteering data doesn't look very good. It really is, if we think participation data is patchy, volunteering is even worse. But what we do have is through our Osplay survey, we do have a few insights. It follows similar trends to what we've seen in other areas of sport. Essentially, it's unequal, it's unfair, it's not representative of a diverse and contemporary Australia. It also is going in the wrong direction. After COVID, we lost over 150,000 volunteers. So we're losing them at a faster rate than we're gaining them. And those that are staying are doing more jobs and feeling burnt out and are having that really demand-driven, so much time. And often they're doing the roles that aren't the juicy stuff they want to do in the first place. It's not the stuff on the field or by the pool. It's the stuff that's taken them to midnight, going through complaints, going through their emails, going through the sheets. So what we're finding is that's not really changing either. We've recovered from COVID, but this report came out this week. Hands up if you've seen the ASF report this week. It's a smaller sample than Osplay, and I could get my nerd on, but I won't. But what it does do is it gives a nice slapshot directly from clubs. So that's something that ASC is doing a bit differently, is clubs traditionally haven't been in our wheelhouse. We, in some ways, are the furthest removed from the tree. We traditionally work through NSOs and really struggle to engage the wider sector. When you put volunteering at the heart of the issue, though, we've got to work with different stakeholders and different people. And this report talked to community clubs. And again, we saw similar themes coming out. And what I've done just here on the slide is just pull out a few key themes that I thought were relevant here. When clubs were directly asked what they wanted funding for, no surprise in the Queensland group, they said the third one was volunteering, especially ahead of 2032. But similar trends around dropping out, the burden, major challenges keeping them, retaining them. So if I was to sum up the three problems that the data is saying we have in volunteering, it's recruitment, retention, and reward. So we've got to do something a bit differently. So again, in 2021, the ASC commissioned the Future of Sport report. But the idea behind this, it's a lengthy document, and it is online, so feel free to have a look at it. But what it aimed to do was really engage wide stakeholders to come together with a vision about what that looks like. And at the heart of the vision going forward was that all people in Australia see themselves in volunteering. It can be person-centred, it can be focused on what they want. So traditionally the rhetoric has been giving back. It's almost like a guilty, negative connotation. We've got to give back to society, often with that kind of those motivated people who just want to give something back. That's great and they get the individual benefit, but it actually can be quite guilt-tripping and quite pressurising. So it's reframing it to say, rather than what do you need, what roles need filled, it's how can I help? And it's matching the person, the skill set. So we need to think a bit differently. And also when you look at other sectors outside of sport, their volunteering lists are growing. And I went down this rabbit hole and lost several hours of my life looking at if you want to foster a puppy or look after a kitten, there's months waiting lists. Humanitarian aid, trauma relief, we saw it with some of the natural disasters. People in the community want to help. Something in sport, though, traditional and inherently in sport is turning people off, and that's what we've got to change. So one of the big things we saw as well was people don't see themselves. All the imagery of volunteering is the classic pale, stale, male type vision. It's not reflective of what people see themselves in. So that's actually what we've been focusing on previously for last year. So this is our vision. This is where we landed, and it had some core principles underneath. I won't read through the slide because I'm conscious of time. But what it started to do was say we've got to listen to the data and evidence. We've got to put people first and at the heart of it. It has to be fun and enjoyable and safe. It has to be diverse, and we have to remember all these values in police when we go through. We've also got to keep it really simple. And that's really difficult when you're tasked with a government strategy, saying we've got to keep it simple. Because probably on the ground, the last thing people need is we need a national strategy. Because let's face it, many of us don't even read the ones that we've got. So it's how do we connect those strategies and investment right down to the people that need it most. When we did a review of what people, and we're looking at the recent report this week, it's not actually a lack of resources. It's trying to find the right resource when you need it at the right time to make sure that person's got the safe, appropriate information at hand when they need it. So we came up with this vision. It's really catchy. People from all walks of life realise opportunities to contribute to individual, club and community goals in a way that suits them. And in a way that suits them is really critical. For too long, sports have voluntold people what to do. And it's relying on those parents who are just the last, the ones that kind of, I'll help out. And before they volunteer for one job and then they've got 10. Or it's the president that's been there for very long. And what's difficult with that is sometimes the people that have been there a long time are what some of the young people coming through are saying that are changing the game. So and we're seeing through our research that younger people really want to get more involved and more engaged, and that's something that we're moving to look at in the next couple of years. But a big part of this was, again, a bit of a shift in the way the ASC was going, was we wanted to make sure that we had a broad range of people willing to help us that represented all different parts of the sector. And we didn't want this to be an ASC strategy, we wanted it to be a sector-owned strategy. So the only way to do that, to listen and understand from experiences, was to get together a coalition. And we went out to advertisement, and people applied to be a part of the coalition, and we came up with these 10 wonderful faces here, who represent different parts of the system, have a whole wealth of expertise, and they were tasked with developing a 4-year action plan. And that is why Jess is on stage, because Jess was one of the wonderful people that applied, put her hand up to say she wanted to be involved on behalf of Queensland Government, and it was great to join this panel of 10 people that came together. And this is where you start to see, so we're gonna go through this journey, but I'm going to actually ask Jess to jump in now, because Jess is going to go through what her role means on the coalition and what we've been doing so far, and then we can focus on where we're going next. So seamlessly, I'm going to pass the baton over to you, Jess.
We should do a song and a dance. I don't have a fun joke from my nan, but I'll just jump straight into it because I know we haven't got much time. So yeah, as Lindsey said, the coalition's comprised of members from across both industry, government and other sort of key volunteer sectors. And we come from very different experience, different backgrounds, which is really, really great because I think the voices of us and many that we represent are actually reflected in this action plan, which is really exciting, and it captures that contemporary Australia that Lindsey was talking about. So, and it's an absolute pleasure to be part of the coalition because, as my introduction said, I'm a mighty hawk. So I love volunteering down at my AFL club as a coach, and then I got roped into all sorts of different things. So yeah, it's hard to pump the brakes when you give a little, but you know, everyone that's in sport really does love their club, their community, and that's kind of why we do it. So bringing that vision to life that you see there on the screen, myself and all of the other coalition members, we're really there, one, to obviously help develop the plan, but also to advocate and promote the plan and its actions to you guys and the sector. So some of the things that I've done personally, I've been part of the launch activities, which had the Federal Minister for Sport, Annika Wells, and Kieran Perkins, who was here today, launched the action plan. I think it was at Kedron Hockey Club, which was really, really exciting. Promoting National Volunteer Week, being able to really reach far and wide with that message around, and Lindsey will probably talk to this a bit more around the campaign that happened this year, a week ago, I think. Time flies. So presenting at conferences, just like this one, I was fortunate enough to be on a panel down in Canberra at the National Volunteer Conference. It was, I think, the first time that sport was actually on the agenda, which was really exciting, and I think I've pinpointed a few people throughout the day that actually made the trip down to Canberra, which was really exciting. So that had all different sectors represented there, from emergency services to community and social services, so it was really good to hear the challenges that they're facing and also some of those solutions and opportunities that us as sport can potentially adopt or pilfer, whichever. What else have I done? Other activities that we're hoping to continue to promote and advocate are those things that are actually being led by the Australian Sports Commission. So their free webinar, they've done 2 so far, the volunteering ones. We pushed out to our Queensland stakeholders, and we're hoping to continue that because those are really, they had really great insights and really good take-up, especially from Queensland too, and they have really good presenters on those webinars. So look out for those emails from us or on our socials through the department's social media, because they're really, really good. I'm in a really unique position on the coalition. I think there's 2 of us actually representing our own state governments, so Queensland Government for me, and this helps me intersect with those cross-government forums that are in place to facilitate that collaboration on a number of industry topics, but mainly volunteering for now, because that's really at the forefront of what we're talking about at the moment. In particular, we have a state and territories meeting that are led by the Australian Sports Commission, and at these meetings we're providing them with an update on how we're going, and we're also trying to stimulate that conversation around identifying key projects that we can do together, because I think it was Kieran, actually most people that were speaking today, Cindy talked about collaboration, like we need to work together on these things. It's fine to go off and do things separately, but the key to this, I think personally as well, is being able to do it together and not working against each other. I think I've touched on messaging, just using our personal networks individually, but also through our formal roles on the coalition, and being able to reach more and more people. And I think I forgot to change my slide. That would have helped. All right, and we'll seamlessly pass back to Lindsey.
So as Jess was saying, I guess a key learning for us has been learning outside of sport. So part of when we launched the coalition was to develop a MOU with Volunteering Australia, and federally they're leading a strategy on national volunteering generally, and we currently share a minister. So volunteering, they're funded by Department of Social Services, but we also have our minister under aged care. So actually reaching out and learning from other sectors around what was going well, what are their issues, and the more you talk and the more you genuinely find areas for alignment, it's actually quite surprising we're grappling with the same challenges. They actually, what an interesting perception was for us was that they looked at us and thought, well, sport's actually one of the leading sectors for volunteering in the country. How come you're coming to us saying you're losing volunteers? So it's a really interesting perception about what's the heart of the problem we're trying to solve. And we've really identified some alignment of funding and also for shared learning, which has been wonderful. But if I go back to here, the four key pillars that we're delivering our change through is through celebrate, reimagine, empower, and innovate. And what we'll just talk through is what we've been doing so far. And in each of those pillars, we had to underpin it by a how. So it's really easy for us to stand up here and say, well, we've got to change volunteering. This is what it looks like. We've got a plan, tick the box, go forward. But what we actually realised quite quickly was it needs a systemic change, which is easy to say, but very, very hard to do. And the look and feel of that in a club is very challenging. So part of the commissioning for that 21 report was to say, well, how do we actually influence change? When we're engaging the sector and we're looking at how we work with clubs, NSOs, SSOs, etc., how do we actually influence? And this is where it's underpinned by, you'll see, how does it look and feel? How does somebody see that they feel and they belong? What's the data and insight saying? So you'll see that no matter what I share, this is the underpinning framework. And as we start to build over the next few years of the plan, we're going to be building out a national volunteer resource hub, which I'll come on to, a national register where we leverage major events that then connect people choosing to volunteer at a major event to community clubland. Everything is underpinned by these key areas of how we actually influence change. So what are we doing so far? Well, the first part of the change journey is to actually increase visibility and raise awareness and share the stories of volunteers that we currently have. What are their experiences? What are the key themes when we actually take time to listen to a volunteer? What comes out? What are the key outcomes that they experience as an individual, or what does that look like at a community? So a big part of what we've done for this first year, because we're coming to the end of year one, is marketing and communication. And a big piece of that was actually developing new content. So make sure that the stories that we were sharing were reflective of real people in real communities. So we've been on a roadshow, we've been out to regional remote areas, right up from Northern Territory, my geography is still not great, but right up in Northern Territory to right down into South Melbourne. So we've really gone all around the country, we covered every single state, tried to get as much diversity and stories and sports, whether it's team sports, individual sports, surf life saving, you name it, to really try and get a look and feel of what community sport feels like. We've done a lot of work to align our funding. So we give out money to the NSOs. Many of them choose to identify volunteering as a priority. How do we connect the work that they're doing with sports that maybe are a bit earlier on in the journey, or how do we align some by grant programs to invest in volunteering? So that's something that ASC has been working on. A big part this year is we integrated a volunteer award for the first year in our high performance awards, which again, a big part of KP coming in was to bring together high performance and community. Sport has a place for everyone. We seem to have split it by high performance and community. Sport is one place. So actually integrating recognition of volunteers in our awards was one way of us having our national endorsement for the work that they do. Major sporting events, we've been working with tech providers, but also major events that we fund, to understand as well as work with them. So what's their event? Volunteering in the event space is a bit more mature sometimes in terms of the data systems, understanding who's choosing to volunteering. When you look at the data from some of them, you see it's a younger person choosing to volunteer than community sport. So again, it's looking for the parallels, looking for the synergies about what we can take from it. And then a big part actually that we've been interested in is recognising the value of youth voice. Youth want to give back. They are very empowered for social change. Yes, we heard KP say this morning, sport can't solve sometimes the physical health, but we do know that sport is a social mirror. And actually, when we start talking about volunteering, it's a brilliant advocacy tool across government for the broad benefits we deliver. Youth are passionate about that. How do we get more young people involved in sport, not just playing sport? So we've set up a youth group that's starting to look at that. Oh, and the big one for me, which I nearly just skipped, was evaluation. Try and get some data. And we've got a project looking at trying to get some national indicators for what does volunteering mean. How are we going to measure it? How do you evaluate the impact of the plan? We've committed to an evaluation of the plan. How do we understand who's choosing to volunteer, the motivations for volunteering? How do we capture that positive experience? So where are we going next? Well, we've celebrated National Volunteer Week. Put your hands up if you did anything for National Volunteer Week this week. Sorry, it was last week, this year. Put your hands up. Brilliant. We got to try and do it every week, don't we? We really do. That's my big thing with it. It's wonderful to see the visibility. My social feed was filled with volunteering stories. I loved it. We did a bit of a 3 cheers for volunteers. Sport fit the Energizer theme for National Volunteer Week this week. But for me, it's like, let's do it all the time. So how do we do it? How do you make everyone's news feeds on their socials constantly filled with volunteer stories? That's just a snapshot of some of the work that we did. Going forward then, for year 2, the coalition are tasked with what are the key priorities for year 2. So we're gaining the visibility, and now we need to start delivering some projects. In each of the pillars, we're going to continue to invest in the digital content, because we're hearing from sports that's important. We're continuing with the VA work. A big part of it, though, is actually looking at tools and resources. How do we make sure that the tools and resources are fit for purpose? And I don't mean reinventing a toolkit or a checklist or a job description, because we did a review of all the resources that exist out there, and wow, there are job descriptions coming out of everyone's ears. There's loads of them, but yet we still hear from people they need them. So for me, it's like we need it obviously at the right time, or we need it in a different format, or we need something. So we're currently looking at what support is needed. What came out from that was we needed one central place to store them. So a big priority going forward is developing a national volunteer hub. Another piece of work we're looking at is how do we connect major event volunteers to community sport. The idea of a volunteer passport's been thrown around in Queensland. A big one for us is how do we look at a national register. That's something that we're working on. I'm going to skip these. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to skip because there might be some Q&As. You're probably hearing, well, this is great on a national level. What does it mean in Queensland? So Jess is just going to bring the local flavour as we head to a close, because I can see you with your clipboard. So that's right. You're ready to go.
Yes, so Queensland initiatives and support. So it's really good to have a national plan. And as Lindsey said before, we have our own plans as well, and half the time we're dusting it off to see what we've actually written. But I just wanted to touch on some programs that Queensland Government support industry with that you guys are probably aware of anyways, considering the audience that I'm speaking to today. But as Lindsey said, clubs are still under pressure, and noting that 63% of clubs are reporting that the main challenge in the last 12 months is actually not having enough volunteers. So post-lockdowns and over the last 12 months, Queensland Government have the Active Industry Project Fund. We've got Active Kit, which is our innovation initiative. We have our ongoing state-level industry support. And some of you may be aware we do have service delivery staff on the ground, and something that we're currently looking at the moment is what do clubs need on the ground without duplicating resources and tools, but how do we complement those tools? Because there's that disconnect between all of these resources and tools out in the ether and actually being able to help clubs on the ground be able to implement them. So seeing what we can do with the staff that we have out on their local ground, as well as supporting the state level organisations through our funding programs. Some of the projects and organisations funded under these initiatives have had some really great outcomes, including reduced administration hours by utilising technology to create efficiencies, removing financial and logistical barriers for volunteers by addressing the need to grow and train capable staff, and rewarding volunteers, as we spoke about, in the community who make significant contributions. So some of those projects and organisations are actually in the room today, and I know we can't go through all of them, but there has been some really good projects. So Tennis Queensland had the Click to Court, that was an active kit project, so Darren is your man if you want to have a chat to him about that project. And Margaret here from hockey, they established an online coaching platform, and these are little things, but I think are really important for our industry. But the biggest importance to me is how do we share that information across each organisation and be able to have more of a systemic change and work together as a whole of industry and government approach. There are many, many more examples of organisations doing really amazing things in this space. But with this national plan, it gives us the remit to actually now take that and get buy-in from all of you guys and all levels of government so we can actually work towards and realise that vision that is outlined in that plan. So having a national approach like the action plan is really the first step to building, that foundation, setting the direction and the focus for Australia. But again, as I said before, it's really critical that we're all working together, being more deliberate and being more coordinated to tackle these challenges that we all face. All right, straight into it. What does this mean for Queensland? So there's a few things up there, but as I touched on before, showcasing successes and learning, and that best practice. So that resource hub that the Australian Sports Commission are leading at the moment, I think is really critical, but being able to identify the best practice resources and tools, but then be able to share and make sure people are aware of them and know that they exist. Leveraging events and legacy outcomes. Obviously, we have Brisbane 2032, and that presents a huge opportunity. Like, I'm sure everyone has said this to you before, but I think there is an opportunity, and I think this is something that came out of the Legacy Forum. I wasn't there, but something that was spoken about a lot in regards to how do you incentivise volunteers through a passport initiative to ensure that we're making volunteering pre and post games or any other events that are on the horizon leading into that Brisbane 2032. We're actually embedding those volunteers, and they're having a great experience too. We don't want to have these volunteers, register to be on that register, partake in Brisbane 2032, have a bad experience and then not want to volunteer again. Like, that is key to that as well, to make sure they're getting back into community and still helping out, regardless of if it's in your local sporting club or in smaller events throughout Queensland or Australia. The last one there is the shared data dictionary. A number of people have talked about this today, but just the consideration of how we're actually collecting data on our volunteers. It was mentioned before that not many people actually put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm actually a volunteer. It kind of goes unnoticed. If they're filling out a survey, they just don't understand the term, what they're doing, cutting up oranges or, doing the boundary. They don't think that as volunteering. So there's a few challenges or issues that we need to sort of address there, and I think that it would be really good to see government working collaboratively with industry to consistently collect that data so we know who, when, where people are volunteering, and it will make our jobs a lot easier too to be able to influence and design interventions.
And probably on that, one of the key pieces of the action plan is it's talking to all parts of volunteering. And what sometimes when we joined the ASC was that we found that we put almost our internal structure onto the external world. So, for example, we have a coaching and officiating team, and then we have a volunteering team. And I'm like, but aren't coaches and officials mostly volunteers? And it felt like we'd almost put our own strategic plan or our own structure onto the way community sport is structured. So the plan is actually speaking to absolutely everyone, recognising the person that helps out on the barbecue right through to the board of directors. And probably what I took from Cindy's point this morning about learning from business, when we put that in the heart of volunteering, you've got corporates who, and KP had a great example, when he left NEB, they were given 16 days a year for volunteering. So how do we tap into the skill sets and the specialist skills that we have held in other parts of the system to come into sport? So we're talking about a whole variety of roles, right through employment opportunities for youth, to giving someone extra exposure, to giving out their day job to maybe help someone in a sporting club that's taking them 5 hours that could take them half an hour, right through to the everyday helpers that help out with jobs they don't even know that they need help with until it's there. So I think that's a key part to make, and I think that was something I took from Sydney this morning around the business attitude for volunteering. There's something in there that we can certainly learn from. We're going to wrap up. So if we go to the last slide, there's a QR code on this slide here. If you would like more information about the plan, or if you want to get involved with anything, or hear more about the work, or put your name up to be part of a case study, or anything like that, if you scan, by the world of technology, based on the session previously, if you scan the QR code, you will come to a form. You can choose to fill out your details. If you then give your email, you can be kept up to date with latest updates, and you can also use the hashtags for some of the recent work that we've done. So I think we'll probably wrap up there so we can go to a bit of a Q&A. Thank you so much, Jess. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys in the Coalition, it really is, and you certainly keep the ASC true, so thank you very much for that. And thank you very much to you all. I'm going to come back. You have a seat. I can stay standing. Oh, okay.
Oh, yes.
Does anyone want an apple? Has anyone else been sat in the audience thinking, I really want one of these apples?
Are they real? I've been looking at
real.
them all day, and I'm like, oh, I wonder
Are they
if
real?
they're
Yep, they're really real.
They look so shiny.
Yeah, I might have one in a
Sorry,
minute.
Tim. I'll steal an apple before it goes.
Just while you guys are thinking of all of your thought-provoking questions, volunteers are the heart of para sport, and I think if it wasn't for our volunteers, para sport and sport would not exist. So it goes down to our coaches, our managers, everybody, our bench, everybody involved is volunteers. So we are very, very grateful for all the work that our volunteers do and give back. So I'm sure I gave you a lot of time to get those brains thinking of questions.
Can you hear that? Oh, that sounds much better. My name's Ryan. I know that you talked at the end towards collecting that data on the who's participating in sports, but have you thought about the why? Because if you look at, and you're probably familiar with the 3 types of motivators, being power, affiliation and achievement, and you could argue that achievement exists at the participating level, but the volunteering level is more affiliation. Have you looked at the why? Because I think you could potentially segment and target people a little bit better if we started collecting that data as well. Thank you.
I'll hand over to the data lady.
Oh, I've been called probably a lot worse. In a nutshell, yes, and that's what we're trying to do through the storytelling, I think. So there is certainly lots of research out there around motivations. I certainly think in volunteering more broadly, we're urging the research community to come forward with, we're not really clear on who's doing research in volunteering, what it looks like. We're trying through our research agenda to talk to those, and we certainly want to make sure that we're prioritising the right questions for researchers going forward. And a lot of the topics that we talk about here and that are presented in participation, like equity, inclusion, diversity, etc., are certainly at the heart of volunteering. In terms of motivations, for us it was, we're trying to capture that through the stories. When you listen to the stories and you identify in each 30-second video the outcomes that people talk about, it's phenomenal how long the list goes. Really what they're talking to is the magic sauce. It's that juicy, warm, fuzzy feeling that they get that they do it. For some people, that is giving back because they've had somebody help them out in a moment of need and they want to create that feeling for somebody else. For somebody, it could be isolation. We've had so many older people talking about it keeps them young at heart, gets them out of the house, helps them make friends. So I think for us, we're trying to learn that as we go by listening to the communities that are engaging. Certainly think there's more work that needs to be done. Major event, there's been quite a bit of research looking at motivations for volunteering at major events. Again, that's very different. In the event space, it's different to community. So I think sometimes we could have actually written 2 strategies, a volunteering for event strategy. And when I say events, it's not just major events. It can be anything from the rec events to a park run to, a Con Games and an Olympics. You could almost do a community sport one and an event community workforce. And some people actually say we shouldn't be calling it a volunteering strategy. It should actually be a community workforce strategy because there's so much of this that needs to come over to the paid workforce. So a long answer to, I think you could never say we've got enough knowledge and insights. So I think certainly we need to keep doing it, but we're certainly committed to listening to it, 100%. I just think we're not very good. We've got the ABS data and national data on volunteering. I just think we need to get better at the grassroots level at genuinely understanding who's there, why they're there, and how we keep them. Another question would be why they're dropping out, why are we losing them, as well as why they're there, why are they also dropping out. Yeah, a wonderful question. So for those of you that may not have heard the question, it was, are we suggesting this data and information could be coming from community sports clubs themselves? A Lindsey view, certainly not an ASE view, a Lindsey view would be, sadly, we are in a world that does revolve around data and insights, whether we want funding, investment, or whatever. So, and actually, and I'm always torn because sometimes the most juicy, wonderful things actually can't be measured because it's such an emotive connection. But I would like to really streamline and be consistent with the data and insights that comes through clubs. I do think traditionally sport comes from a very different level when you compare it to other government portfolios like travel or public health or health, who routinely have been built on collecting high quality, consistent, routine data. Sport doesn't do that very well. I still question we're collecting membership rates, not participation. So when we're going into health, we're not talking about minutes spent playing to justify a health outcome. We're talking about number of paid subscriptions we've had that year. Same with volunteers. Many people in sport can't disaggregate their playing people from their volunteers. I'm on the Global Research Board for Parkrun, and something that we continue to talk about is how do we separate our volunteers from our active parkrunners, because in the database they involve in parkrun. So I actually do think we would like clubs, the Lindsey again view is I would like clubs to start collecting this because we want you to empower your own data as well. This isn't about collecting data and giving it to somebody else to have a magical outcome. We know if you've got skin in the game and you own and believe in the data you're collecting, you're more likely to use it, listen to it, and have a positive change off the back of it. So my personal view is yes, I would love that. Whether that's a bit utopian, whether that probably divides the room, I'm not sure. But I certainly think we need more information at the grassroots level, which is only ever going to come from clubs. And I guess the last point on that is many people come to us saying, well, Ozplay is not the reality that I see. So if it's not the reality at a national level, then we need to have it on a lower level so you've got the story that is relevant to you. But again, that's a Lindsey view. Got to have my government hat on.
Wonderful. Well, I wish we had more time for more questions, but that's it. So thank you so much, Lindsey and Jess. Give them a round of applause.